Hebrews, Hebrews 10 and 12. By this man, after he had offered sacrifice for sins forever, sat down on the right hand of Elohim. That one?
No, it's
11?
19 through 20.
Hebrews 10 and 19. Having therefore, brethren, boldness to enter into the holiest of the blood of Yahshua, by a new and living way, which he hath consecrated for us through the veil, that is to say, his flesh, and having a high priest over the house of Elohim.
okay. So by his blood, we have access to go boldly before the throne of Yahweh. It's a new and living way, because this was sealed up. At the very beginning of time, you see it's sealed up. And even in Daniel, it talks about the book being sealed. Well, that book is Yahweh Elohim. And all his secrets were locked up within him. There had to be a time and a purpose, and it had to be carried out, because Yahweh has a certain timing. He was held out, just like the lamb in Egypt was held out from Abib 10th to Abib 14th. 4 days had to be held out, showing forth that Yahshua was held over for 4,000 years from here all the way to here, 4,000 years, that he was held out, and his purpose was manifested 4,000 years from Adam to Yahshua. And so that's showing forth a purpose, that he's held out for a purpose to be our salvation in the fourth day. Because if you look in the days of creation, like Mariyah was talking about, you can see that in the fourth day, the sun, moon, and stars was created on the fourth day. Even though on the first day, Yahweh said, let there be light, and there was light. But this was spiritual light, because the sun, moon, and stars wasn't created until on the fourth day. So now we see the bodies that are manifesting this spiritual light that was spoken out on the first day. And so that's showing forth what Yahweh set up in the very beginning. This pattern is actually being carried out or played out through the ages and dispensations. So we see this lamb after 4 days. It had to be without spot, blemish, and after that, it was killed, and then they had to put the blood on the 3 points of the door, and the fourth being the basin at the bottom. And so that's showing a principle of Yahshua, because Yahshua was held out for 4 days, and not any of his bones were broken, no spot and any blemish. And even Pilate said, I found no fault in him. Right. That's showing forth that he was that lamb. And even John recognized that at the baptism, when he says, behold the lamb that cometh to take away the sins of the world. But even John didn't realize that until he had to see a vision. And once he seen the Spirit remain on Yahshua, then he realized what he seen in that vision. To whom you see the Spirit remain, he's the Lamb of Yahweh. And so once he saw that, then he declared that, behold the Lamb that cometh to take away the sins of the world. And so we see this pattern, manifested through the law and the prophets, continuously. I mean, the elementary chart shows those principles. This pattern is carried out. We also see right here, same principle here, is we see Abraham offering his son Isaac on the altar. And so, but at this time, it wasn't time for a human sacrifice. It was only the animal sacrifice, because Yahshua would be the only one that would come in the likeness of sinful flesh, which would be the perfect sacrifice. But this lamb was caught in the thickets between his horns, and that's showing forth that Yahshua was caught between the law and the prophets. He didn't deviate, he was in line with the law and the prophets. And so, and also Yahshua had the crown of thorns, and that's what the ram was caught between his horns, with the thorns. And also, Yahshua had to carry his wood. He had to carry the cross. Well, Isaac had to carry his wood up there for the sacrifice, the burn. And so, and also too, is he sweat a lot, trying to carry up that mountain, and also too, not knowing what would be the sacrifice, because he even asked Abraham, where's the sacrifice? And Abraham said, Yahweh himself shall prepare shall be the sacrifice. So Yahweh himself. And so we see the principle of blood, and then we have the water, which is the sweat, and then the spirit that told Abraham not to sacrifice his son Isaac. And so we see these principles repeated, so that way we know something about Yahshua. We know his death, burial, resurrection, and we know that he is the true Messiah. This isn't, we can't find those principles in Muhammad or Buddha or Allah. We don't see this continuous line of witnesses that are constantly witnessing and showing proof that he is who he says he is. That's the same thing with this vision. Dr. Henry Clifford Kinley, he told us to prove it, to prove this vision, to our own satisfaction. Make him prove it. Is this vision from man, or is this from Yahweh? And so this has given us many proofs that this was and is a divine vision from Yahweh Elohim. And that's how we prove it, is by the tabernacle and the witnesses that are in that tabernacle. Because Yahshua was pierced in the side. Out came forth blood and water, and he already gave up the spirit. And so we have those principles of blood, water, and spirit. And that's what Paul talks about. Can you get Corinthians 15, 1 through 4?
1 Corinthians 15 and 1. Moreover, brethren, I declare unto you the gospel which I preached unto you, which also ye have received, and wherein ye stand, by which also ye are saved, if ye keep in memory what I preached unto you, unless ye have believed in vain. For I delivered unto you first of all that which I also received, how that the Messiah died for our sins according to the Scriptures, and that he was buried, and that he rose again the third day according to the Scriptures.
Okay, Paul's saying, I declare unto you the gospel. Well, what is the gospel? Well, he says what the gospel is. He says that how that Yahshua died, how he was buried, and then he resurrected. And so that is the gospel by which we are saved. That's if we keep that in our memory, and keep that on our hearts and our minds, because it's that death, burial, resurrection. And that death, when you see death, you usually see blood. When you see burial, that's baptism or water. And so when you see the resurrection, that is the Spirit. And so those are physical witnesses showing forth the spiritual principles of how, the gospel of how which we are saved. And so the gospel is, how is the gospel, how are we given the gospel? It's by the preaching. It's not by physical water. You know, Jesus didn't institute water baptism. Yahshua didn't. He didn't institute that. He fulfilled that. And he even said it in John 14. Can you get that? Now ye are clean by the word that I've spoken.
John 15, you got it?
Yeah. John 15:3. Abide in me, and I be in you. Excuse me. 15:3. Now ye are clean through the word which I have spoken unto you.
Do you notice he didn't say, now you are clean by the words I've spoken to you? He didn't say
The word.
clean by the words. He said the word.
Yeah, singular.
And he is that word. He spoke himself. When he was speaking it because he says, I am the bread that cometh down from heaven. You know, your fathers did eat manna and died. But you eat of me, you'll have everlasting life. He also is that water. The woman at the well was looking for water. And he says, well, you drink of this water, you'll thirst. But if you drink the water that I'll give you, you'll never thirst. He is that water. He is that bread. He is that manna. He is the intercessor. He's all in all. And that's why we have to stand in the holy place. And it's those witnesses that are in this tabernacle that give us that resurrection and also give us that ascension into the most holy place. And with that, I say hallelujah.
Thank you, Dr. Bowman. Our next speaker for today will be the dean of our school, Dr. Terry Welsh.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon. I very much enjoyed the remarks of the previous speakers, and I noticed something that I just kind of wanted to highlight. They said enough that if we understood it, would save the entire world. And even the prayer this morning had to do with being thankful for the things that we learn when we come in here and that we take with us when we leave. Right. And that's something that I have had to been brought aware of on a number of occasions, and that is that a lot of times we will be here in class, but you know, we don't really think too much about exactly what we've been taught after we leave. That ends up cheating ourselves when we do that. So it's a good idea to form the habit of doing something to remind yourself and review some of the key points that have been made in class. I've noticed that this is a principle with learning in physical things. Okay? For example, I do lots of workplace safety training. And I teach things such as CPR and first aid, which hopefully people don't have to ever use. You know, like CPR, hope you never have to use it. But if you do, you want to know how to do it correctly, and you want to be able to respond quickly, and so forth. And because of the fact that we don't use those skills on a day-to-day basis, a lot of times people don't ever rehearse those things in between their classes. And maybe they'll take a class every 2 years. And in the meantime, during the 2 years, they haven't reviewed it. And so what do you think their skill level is when it comes around for renewal time? Pretty low, right? And their level of confidence is pretty low. And their response, their recall, and so forth, a lot of times is very low. But there is just a very simple, very effective little key as to what can help absolutely triple the benefit that people get out of it. And I tell them this when it comes to the CPR class. I give them a very small amount to review that takes 5 minutes, 10 minutes if you go very thoroughly. And in those 5 to 10 minutes, I ask them to review it in 2 to 3 days after the class, then in 2 to 3 weeks, and then again in 2 to 3 months. And if you will do it in that fashion, I make them a guarantee that they will be 3 times as good at it in terms of their speed, their propriety of their response, their recall of all of it at the end of their 2 years for their certification. Now, if we would do the same thing in class and remember the things that we were taught that were good, and then go remind ourselves of it within 24 hours, 48 hours, and so forth, we would end up really getting at least a double portion, so to speak, out of it. And another thing that I've noticed is this. A lot of times, we get in the habit of kind of doing nothing with it. And a lot of times, if there is something that seems to make us irritated, that's the only thing we respond to. So we'll rehearse and review in our mind something that we didn't like or thought was wrong, but the things that were right and beneficial, we end up dropping. And it's a very, very, very good habit to get into the habit of noting some things that were helpful and good and reviewing those things. And that makes a huge difference. We have the responsibility of learning the things that He has put before us. And it's a great benefit because this is a gift. And if we don't take it and unwrap it and use it, it just sits on the shelf and grows dust, so to speak. Now, I noticed even from the comments of the very first speaker, one of the very first things she said something that I noted that was very specific and I thought very helpful. Started out by talking about the idea that Yahweh gave Moses a vision and then specified, did you notice, that it was Yahweh Elohim that gave Moses the vision. And then went on and even clarified the fact that it was Joshua, who is Yahshua, who actually took Moses up there on that mountain and transfigured or transformed in front of him to give him that vision. That Moses went up there, Joshua took him up, and then ended up showing him those things. Do you realize that's a profound mystery? That is a secret and a key to understanding some things that the world isn't privileged to. And, when you think about the importance of just that comment, your jaw ought to drop. You ought to go, wow. Because the significance of that is awesome. This is the fact that the Creator Himself manifested in a physical body back here, even before He manifested in a physical body down here. And I'm not going to do it today, but this would be something that would be good for someone to do as their own little project review. We've got all kinds of things in writing that you can review to show that Joshua was Yahshua. And there's a whole series of scriptures. There's a pamphlet on it. There is some additional scriptures and so forth that I can give you that are already written out. But that's an awesome mystery. That was one of the mysteries that Dr. Kinley cracked open at one of the conventions. I forget which one it was. I'm going to say I think it was at 1971 convention, back many, many, many years ago in any case, and people were just dumbfounded. But it's an incredibly important key to understanding. And part of the reason for it is something that I'll just mention in passing, and then I want to move on to another point. Would you please get for me the 12th chapter of the book of Hebrews? You see, it was also mentioned that Yahshua the Messiah did not come in this body to institute or start a religion or a way of life or a Christian example or a set of ordinances for us to do. But here he came in to fulfill. But I want you to understand that Yahshua did institute. But he didn't do it in that body. He did it in this body. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because institutes is start, set up, so forth. This was Yahweh Elohim in this body starting a covenant or setting up a covenant in a relationship with these people, the children of Israel, and then it had to be him that would come in and fulfill it or satisfy the very covenant that they agreed to keep with him. So he had to come in and give it to them. They accepted it, and he had to come in and do it for them because they were unable to do it for themselves. But he did institute and there, and then he fulfilled down here. Now, even the fact that he instituted back there in that body is a manifestation in physical form, that he had instituted a creation or made a creation back in the realm of eternity, and he is the one that is going to end up coming in and closing that creation out. And in addition to this, just so I don't forget, would you also get for me Revelation, the 1st chapter? Don't leave Hebrew, no, go right to Hebrews 12. And then the other reader get Revelation 1. Hebrews 12.
Hebrews 12. Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth easily beset us.
Okay, now, Paul starts out there, and you got to ask yourself a question. Why would Paul write like that? We are compassed about with a great cloud of witnesses? Why would he even use that kind of an expression? Why would he use that kind of an expression? And yes, he's writing to the Hebrews, right? Well, when Moses was up here and he saw all these things that Yahweh Elohim made, and all these things were witnesses unto him, where was Moses? In the cloud. And it was already mentioned also that this was in the realm of eternity. That was mentioned this morning. That's important. But the cloud, and it's on the chart, the cloud symbolizes what? Eternity. And this is where Yahweh Elohim gives the vision and the revelation of himself. I'll give you another witness or example. The one that he gave. Because remember, he had this tabernacle made as a tabernacle of witness. And in this tabernacle, which there's a larger drawing of here, what he did was he appeared in the cloud between the wings of the cherubim upon the mercy seat, okay? And the priest was there in the most holy place, and when he went in there, he had to carry a censer in there. And that cloud of incense would fill this, and so the priest was in the cloud, and Yahweh Elohim appeared there, and this is showing him up in the most holy place in the cloud, like Moses is in the peak of the mountain, the most holy place in the cloud, showing, entering into the realm of eternity, which Dr. Kinley called what? The realm of eternity is called the day of Yahweh. It is the day of Yahweh. He also talks about it as the third what? Heaven. The third heaven. 1, 2, 3. This is showing the third heaven. Okay? Now all these things are things that everybody in this class has heard, knows, so forth, okay? But do we review them, put them together, and remind ourselves of the significance of them, okay? And if we would do that, a lot of times Yahweh would just give you these moments, where you'd really appreciate some of the significance because you'd be able to correlate. And you wouldn't be doing it on your own. It would be just that Yahweh in you has conditioned you, trained your mind, trained your thinking, and then what he does is he'll bring back to your remembrance something that he's already said to you and give you the revealed understanding, because now you see, oh, it fits with the migratory pattern, with the tabernacle pattern, with all these other witnesses and examples, okay? So now here Paul talks about the fact that we are compassed about by so great a cloud of witnesses, and Moses is up here in the cloud to receive the vision. Had to be in that cloud to receive the vision, okay? So he says we're compassed about by so great a cloud of witnesses, so let's lay aside every weight and the sin that doth so easily beset us, and let us do what?
Run with patience the race that is set before us.
Let us run with patience, and this is an endurance race. And sometimes it feels that way, okay? Because do you know how people are? Now I want you to think about this, okay? And this is another thing that I've noticed when it comes to the teaching. That, like I said, the things that were already taught this morning, if we appreciated them, would be enough to save the entire world, okay? But they made so many points so quickly that I'll bet you we, almost all of us, and that includes me, didn't even process, I was going to say half of them, I'll bet you we didn't process 90% of them. Why? Because they just made a point, 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 but there wasn't any correlational emphasis in the majority of them. Why? Because they just hurried up and got to the point. And that's the way people are. They say, well, I got a question, okay? So you go ahead to answer the question. Yeah, but just answer my question. Don't give me all that background. Just answer my question. You know how that is? You know how people are about that? Okay. Well, and that's the way people were with Dr. Kinley. And there were times when people did that and complained about him going all the way out back here to Moses and giving all the correlations and so forth. And they said, Doc, you're always doing that. Just answer my question. He says, and if I do that, you won't understand it. So then another time, person asked a question, he just answered the question. Next thing you know, person didn't remember anything about it. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay? So we are needing to run the race with patience. We've got to continue and continue, instead of hurry up and answer my question, or hurry up and get to the point, or hurry up, Yahweh, and give me everything. Okay? It doesn't work that way. So here's Moses up here, and he says, let us run with patience the race that is set before us. Please read.
Looking unto Yahshua, the author and finisher of our faith.
All right, now he says that we are looking unto who? Folks, the revelation of this is always the revelation of Yahshua. It is something of Yahshua that's revealed. If it's information, it can be about the creation. If it's revelation, it's about him. And it's really a revelation of him, at least in some part. Okay? So he says, let's look unto Yahshua, who is both the author and the finisher of our faith. Now let me show you. Paul is writing to, and somebody already pointed out this morning, what group is he writing to? He's writing to the Hebrews, right? Now the Hebrews are the Jews. They're the people that Yahweh back here made the Old Testament with, okay? And that's the group that Paul is from. And Paul was staunch and learned and very devoted in those things that Yahweh had done with those Hebrews, okay? So when he says, we are compassed about by so great a cloud of witnesses, part of what he's talking about there is that we, the Hebrews, now I'm not talking about we as Gentiles, we're not necessarily compassed about in the same way that they were, because we're not practicing on a constant basis the things that they practiced based on the Old Testament law. But their entire practice daily of the law, the administration in the tabernacle and everything, was constantly giving them witnesses about Yahshua the Messiah. Constantly, constantly, constantly. It was a great cloud of witnesses to them. Now, Yahshua, back here, and I'm pointing to him right here, Joshua the son of Nun, as Yahshua, who was Yahweh Elohim in a body. Yahshua is the one that was up here on Mount Sinai speaking the law. And when he spoke the law, what else happened simultaneously as he spoke it? True, an earthquake. He wrote it also, right? So in other words, what he wrote, what he spoke, he wrote with his finger. What he spoke with his mouth, he wrote with his finger, because it says these were written with the finger of Elohim. Okay? So he wrote it here, and this is the tables of the testimony, or the tables of the covenant. So he spoke it and simultaneously wrote it. That means, folks, he authored it. True? And this was the foundation of the covenant, or the faith, that Paul had been under, and that those Hebrews had been under, the ones that he was writing to. So he says Yahshua is the author of our faith, and he says also that Yahshua is the what? The finisher of our faith, meaning of the Hebrews' faith, okay, or the Old Testament. But did Joshua the son of Nun finish that covenant or that faith? No. But the same Spirit came in a body 1,500 years roughly. He authored it with Joshua and Moses back here. And he came in a physical body down here. And in this case, his role was to do what? To fulfill or finish it. And that's what he said. I come to do the will of my Father and to finish his works. So obviously the works had already been set up and instituted when he came in. And in this role, he's here to finish it. Okay? And it's very important that we see what he did, how he fulfilled it, how he finished it. Okay? Now, in order to do that, we have to see something about him instituting it. Institution, fulfillment. And you do that by co-relating, okay, or seeing how it is back there and how it is down here. So Yahshua was the author of the Hebrews' faith. He was the finisher of the Hebrews' faith. And since after that, he then makes a new covenant. Okay, and I'm trying to move on to another point real quick. I can give scripture for you if you want. I'm not going to do it, but I could get Romans, the first chapter, the 16th verse and on down, and I'll just tell you a little bit about it real quick. Here in Romans 16 through 19, he talks about the fact that, and again it's Paul writing again, he says that I'm not ashamed of the gospel of the Messiah because it's the power to save those that believe. Okay? And he says to everyone that believeth. Okay? But then he says, also in another place he says it's to the Jew first and then to the Gentile. Right? And then he says it is revealed from faith to faith. Okay? And so by going from faith to faith, you got to understand, as Paul was talking about to the Hebrews, Yahshua authored the faith. He finished that faith, and it's really Yahshua the Messiah that's the reality of the faith. And it's Yahshua the Messiah that ends up writing the New Testament or the New Covenant. But this time when he writes it, and he writes it by speaking, why? Didn't he write this one when he spoke? Okay? And he wrote it in the heart. So this one, when he speaks the New Covenant, or speaks it down from heaven, doesn't he write it in hearts and minds? And he prophesied about that back in Jeremiah 31:31. I'll write it in your hearts. Okay? He says, I'll make a new covenant and I'll write it in your hearts and in your minds. Okay? So here he authors the faith of the new covenant, but it's spiritual. And he is now, at this time, coming in, he is fulfilling spiritually what he authored then. So what I'm saying is, he authored the Hebrews faith that was based on physical carnal ordinances and a law. He finished the Hebrews faith that was based on physical carnal ordinances and that law. Now he's authoring a new covenant, and the faith is the faith of Yahshua the Messiah. That's now written in the heart or mind, and it has to be his Holy Spirit in us that's spiritually fulfilling that. Now, can I give you one example of how he does it? I just want to give you an example so you see the pattern, so you see what I'm talking about. He had an old covenant that incorporated physical circumcision. So when he comes in down here, he has to be physically circumcised. This fulfills that circumcision, okay? This old covenant had various different forms of ceremonial washings, baptisms, and so forth. So when Yahshua the Messiah comes in, he is baptized not because he has sin. He doesn't have sin. He's baptized to fulfill those baptisms, just like he said to John the Baptist, okay? He is the true sacrifice. They had sacrifices back there, but he is the last sacrifice of all sacrifices. So he is the institutes it physically. That was done with Joshua and Moses. He fulfills it physically. That is done as Yahshua the Messiah. So he authored that. He finished that. But now the same principles are over here, but with a different manifestation. Because these he wrote in tables of stone. This he writes in the fleshly tables of your heart. Okay? And this is by grace through faith, but this was by works. Okay, those were physical. This is spiritual. So, look at this. It is now, not by physical circumcision, that we are dedicated unto Yahweh or separated out from the world. It's by the faith of the circumcision of Yahshua the Messiah. And if you want scripture on that, I'm not going to have you read it right now. Go get Colossians, the 2nd chapter, the 9th verse through the 12th verse. Okay? So it's by the faith of the circumcision of Yahshua. This is by faith. Okay? And what he's doing, he's circumcising one's heart or mind today. He's not circumcising the flesh from beneath like he did back there. He's circumcising the heart or the mind. Okay? What does that mean? Well, look, circumcision physically was designed to remove a veil of flesh that covered the head, or that obscured the head of the organ that gives life. Now think about this for just a minute. If he's circumcising the heart and the mind, circumcising the eyes, so to speak, what he's doing is removing a veil of flesh or carnal-minded thinking so that you can now see the head that gives life. And Yahshua is the head of the assembly. Right? And he is the one that gives life by the preaching of the gospel. So now he's no longer obscured once Yahweh has circumcised your mind. Okay? He's not washing your physical body today, but he is baptizing you with the Holy Spirit. Okay? It's a different baptism, but the principle's the same, isn't it? Okay? And all the things, instead of physical sacrifices, over here, it's spiritual sacrifices. Like he says, the fruit of your lips giving thanks to his name. Okay? So, Yahshua the Messiah authored the new covenant when he wrote it on the day of Pentecost, but it's got to be his Spirit coming into each one of us and fulfilling or bringing into reality the things that he authored. Do you understand what I'm saying? So he authored it for the Jews, physically with Joshua. He fulfilled it or finished it with the Jews, physically as Yahshua the Messiah. He authors it under the new covenant, spiritually by preaching the gospel, giving you those words, and he fulfills it spiritually by coming into you as the Holy Spirit and making you have faith and believe in the things that he has spoken unto you. So he authored and finished the Jews' faith. He is offering and finishing or fulfilling the faith in you now too, by the same pattern. Okay? All right, and that was the point I was trying to get at, was author and finisher. And then I want to get to another point here, but just for confirmation, let me go get Revelation 1. I think it's verse 10?
Revelation 1 and 10.
Yes.
I was in the Spirit on the Sabbath day.
Okay, now, John is up in the Spirit on the Sabbath day, okay? And in principle, he is in the same place as Moses. And we could go into great deal correlating Moses' vision with John's vision up here. In fact, I understand that that was done and done quite nicely in the last class. So, again, see those correlations in the understanding of those things, okay? You've got to be in that cloud or in that third heaven. So he says, I was in the Spirit and I was on the Sabbath day. Please read.
And heard behind me a great voice as of a trumpet,
Yes?
saying, I am Alpha and Omega,
Well, Alpha and Omega, or in Hebrew, Aleph and Tau. What is that?
the first and the last.
First letter, last letter, right? And he goes on and he says, I'm Alpha and Omega. Please read.
The first and the last.
Now, he's the first and he is the last. What does it say right up here? See this word? First. What does it say right up here? Last. Okay? So Yahshua, he says, I am Alpha and Omega, the first and the last, the what?
What thou seest, write in a book.
What thou seest, write in a book. Now, he had Moses write in a book, so now he's got to have John write it in a book. Okay? Please continue.
And send it to the 7 assemblies which are in Asia.
Now, Moses had to have the 70 elders give this to the people. He had to send it to the 7 assemblies, and I'm not going into all the other details. So, he is the first and the last, which is the same thing as author and finisher. Now, Dr. Kinley had this coded on the chart. Watch this. You see the letter under Yahweh Elohim here? What is that letter? That's A. Now you go on down here, you see Yahweh Elohim. At the very end, you see it's Yahweh Elohim on the far ends. Then it's the tabernacle in, right? And then it's him in the creation here. So you've got 3 letters, okay? So the first letter is A, the last letter is what? F. This is an F. All right. Under Yahweh Elohim here is the letter A. Under Yahweh Elohim here is the letter F. That's author and finisher. Now the next letter after A is what? B, and B is under the tabernacle pattern. Go on down here. Under the tabernacle pattern is the letter before F, which is what? E. That's what? Beginning. That's ending. Right? And then you see him here doing what? Well, tabernacle here. Go on over here. What's this one? This is the creation. So now you see him as creator. But in the end, you see the letter D. Will be the destroyer. The creation that he created, he will bring it into destruction. Except for those souls that he is reaping from the earth, those that he saves. So he is the author, the finisher, the beginning, the ending, the creator, and the destroyer. You see that? Now I'm saying that sets up a pattern for you to look at. That gives you something, if you can understand the principle, okay, that it will help you. It will help you because you'll be able to use that in other things in relationship to the same teaching, the same vision and revelation. But you'll forget it if you don't review it, okay? So we review those things, all right? Instead of just saying, when we're done, well, what'd you learn in class today? Oh, it was a good class. I don't remember anything, okay? So we make note of it, we review it, it helps, okay? All right, so that was just a point about it, okay? And there were so many things that have already been said this morning. Now, another thing that was mentioned, again, in passing, wasn't elaborated on. You have bones in your body. The bones give you your shape and your form, right? And the bones are a symbol of what? Spirit. They're a symbol of the Spirit in a particular shape and form, which is what? Your soul. That's exactly right. Okay, and you can go into Ezekiel and you'll find out there he talks about the valley of the dry bones, right? And these bones, he asks, who are these bones? Well, these bones are the children of Israel, right? Those souls that Yahweh has as the children of Israel. The bones are a symbol of the soul, okay? Now, these bones basically go from the top of your body to the bottom of your body. Follow me? And it gives you your shape and your form. Now, without your bones, folks, you'd be a... Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Okay? So, what's the principle? Well, Yahweh first, and this was, Dr. David Underwood has gone through a lot of things. We went through it this morning in the early session. That's another thing. Lots of information. Let's process it, okay? What's the significance of it? We'll take a couple of things only and work with it. Yahweh first existed in totality as pure spirit. We symbolize that by the cloud. In reality, or to be more specific, the cloud symbolizes the realm of eternity in which Yahweh exists. But Yahweh used that as a representation of the presence or the ever-presence of His Spirit, the cloud. You understand what I'm saying? Okay? Now, and if you'll notice, I want you to recognize something. How many clouds is it on this chart? It's one cloud. Now, everything exists within the cloud on the chart, showing forth that everything does what? Moderator says at every class, abides within the pure spirit state of Yahweh. In other words, nothing has gotten outside of Yahweh at any time. Right? That's why the cloud encompasses everything on the chart. You are encompassed by a great cloud of witnesses. Okay? So, this is the cloud symbolizing Yahweh in His pure spirit state. But within the cloud, you have things that are specific. Okay? And it's like it was already mentioned, Yahshua, how was it put? Yahshua did not say, you are clean by the words I've spoken unto you. You read it in John 15:3. He says they were now clean by the word that He'd spoken unto them, and He is and was the Word. True? Do you realize what that means? That just means He expressed Himself. That's all that means. The Word is Yahweh expressed. And if you don't like me saying it, you could take it right out of the Bible, because it says right in there that He is the express image of the Father. The expressed image of the Father. This is an image, folks. And this is the only true image of Him that there is. People form all kinds of false images of who God is and what He's like. Okay? And sometimes they'll call it God. Sometimes they'll even call it Yahweh Elohim. But if they've got a false image, then it's not really Him. It's an idol. Okay? So, this is Him, and as Dr. Kinney put it, this is Him in the bosom of the Father. One of the transcripts that was cited this morning was showing how Dr. Kinley expressed that this Yahweh Elohim is Yahweh, but in the word there was limitations. And when he said that this is Yahweh in limitations, that's very similar to the way he puts it in the textbook, that this is Yahweh in part, not in totality. And he says that doesn't mean that the stuff that's here in pure spirit isn't all here. That just means that this is only a part of the total. And Dr. Kinley used another expression. He says, think of this all as like an ocean, and think of this like a cup. Now, if everything in the sea, in the ocean, is distributed in the water, then you could take a cup of that water and you'd have the same stuff that's in the entire ocean, only you wouldn't have the total quantity, right? That would only be the ocean in part, not in totality. This is part of Yahweh. Not that he's deficient. It's just that this is a lesser quantity. And one other thing that was pointed out in that transcript, that this is Yahweh in shape and in form in the bosom of the Father. See, and that expression's taken right out of the Bible. Okay? That's in John, the 1st chapter. So we go back and we read those. See? He's in the bosom of the Father. And that, it talks about the fact there that no man has seen Yahweh at any time. Now I'm quoting to you out of John, the 1st chapter. You see, this is an example of something. Go home and read John, the 1st chapter. And find the sections that I'm talking about there. Like if you go to John, the 1st chapter, first couple of verses, first 4 verses, then go on down to the 14th through the 18th verses. Okay? That'll give you enough on this. But he talks about the fact here that no man has seen the Father or Yahweh at any time. But the only begotten Son, who is where? In the bosom of the Father, right? He has declared him. And isn't declaring him the same thing as expressing him? So this is Yahweh declared, or this is Yahweh expressed, or this is the expressed image of the Father. Make sense? Okay? But he is in the bosom. And that's why he says he says that's like that little cup out of the entire ocean. Okay? Now, I'll give you another example, because I'm trying to help you understand Yahweh, Elohim, Yahshua, as he really is. Not a concept, as he really is. And if you do that, you will understand all kinds of other things better. Okay? So, now, this is Yahweh in part, not in totality. And by the way, he also says that Yahshua is Yahweh Elohim in part, not in totality. But all of the attributes that are here are here. And all of the attributes that are here are here. But this is a smaller quantity than this. Which means that there was plenty of spirit left over when he came out of pure spirit into shape and form. Follow me? But this is him in shape and form. This is him in shapelessness. And only part of him took on shape and form. Make sense? Okay? And therefore he's in the bosom of the Father. All right. Now, this is a fixed shape and form. It's unalterable. It does not change. And how do you know that from the Bible? If you go to Isaiah 46, 9 and 10. He says there that the word is gone forth out of my mouth, and it shall not return unto me. Okay? Right, it shall not return unto me void, but it shall accomplish that which I have spoken. Yahweh does not change. Okay? So here he is. He is set. It's in him in a fixed position. That's another thing about those attributes. The attributes in shape and form. Maybe we can get to that. Okay? Now, the tabernacle manifested that. So now watch. Watch in the tabernacle. Okay? The tabernacle and its construction is a physical witness of Yahweh Elohim coming out of pure spirit into shape and form. There was substance or spirit that came out of darkness and abstraction into an intermediate state. There was substance that Yahweh had Israel despoil from the Egyptians that came out of Egypt. Egypt represents what? Darkness. That's what it means, dark land. Right. So he had them despoil the Egyptians and take stuff or substance out of Egypt and bring it here into the wilderness. He did not have them build the tabernacle down here, because this is showing them in chaos and in shapelessness. But this is showing him taking on shape and form. So this is not Yahweh in shape and form. This is abstraction. That's what Dr. Kinley says. It's abstraction. To man, this would be as chaos. Okay? But then he comes out of abstraction and he takes on a shape and a form. That's from an highest state to a lower state. So from an abstract state to an intermediate state here with the tabernacle. Now, what does he do with the substance? He has to have the substance not only taken out of Egypt, but he has to have it offered. Willingly. That's right. That's right. Because he told Moses, and I want to make this very clear, there was a specific purpose Yahweh gave for having the tabernacle built. He said, let them make me a sanctuary. For what reason? That I may dwell among them. I want you to understand something. Yahweh was with the people all the way through because Yahweh is everywhere. There's nowhere where Yahweh isn't. That includes in the lake of fire. Because this is the lake of fire. That chaos, that fiery cloud. But it doesn't hurt Yahweh one bit. But it hurt you a whole lot. That's why he says the day of Yahweh, it's darkness, not light. But then in another case he talks about, well, it's light and not darkness. And then he says, to Yahweh, the darkness and the light are alike. But it ain't that way to you. You've got to come out of darkness into the light. Make sense? So yeah, Yahweh's ever present, but that's but him in different states. Very important. Okay? So what he does is he gives his son the substance or the spirit stuff to make a creation. And he is going to dwell in his creation. And the word dwell in the Old Testament is tabernacle. Same thing. Let them make me a tabernacle that I might dwell among them. Let them make me a dwelling place. Folks, until this was made, there was no dwelling place for Yahweh. Except for one tent. Mystery that you'll never figure out. And that one tent was the tent of Joshua the son of Nun. And that was this tent here. And when he got out here, Joshua set up his tent in the middle of the camp, right? Nope. Wrong. Nope. Absolutely wrong. Joshua's tent was completely afar off. That's the words in the Bible. He set up the tabernacle of the congregation, which was Joshua's tent, afar off from the congregation. How far off? It was on the backside of the mountain, and the people were able to just go onto the mountain anytime they wanted. Yahweh said, don't touch that mountain because I'll kill you. Do you see? He was with them, but not in them. Do you see that? Until when? Until this tabernacle was built. Then the cloud and the glory of Yahweh descended from off Mount Sinai, where he was far off from the people, and came down into the midst of the tabernacle. Then the people could camp around the tabernacle, and he's in their midst. But folks, that didn't happen for a full year after he brought them out of the land of Egypt. Now that's in the Bible. And you have to deal with that. Now, in order to understand Yahweh, I mean, okay? So that's what he made the tabernacle for. Now here was the point. To make the tabernacle, Yahweh specified the stuff or the substance that was going to be used. And he specified 9 substances that would actually go into the physical tabernacle. There was a 10th item, but it was not part of the tabernacle itself. It was part of the priest's garments and used by the priest in service. Okay? Now, when he took those 9 substances, folks, those 9 substances are in 3 categories. Okay? And I could list them all to you real quick. I'll do it real quick, okay? Gold, silver, brass. Those are metals, okay? Blue, purple, scarlet, fine twined linen, okay? So there's the linen, the hair, okay, because there's goat's hair, right? And then there's skins. Ram skin dyed red, and badger skin, okay? Ram skin, badger skin dyed red. Anyway, so there's coverings, okay? Those materials like the coverings, the linen, the skin, the hair, okay? And then what he's got also is the wood and the oils and spices, okay? So he's got those organic materials. So there is in 3 classes here. So there's 3 groups of 3. What does that represent? What does that represent? Well, it will be manifested in each person, yes. But what it represents is something about him. Because remember, as we said, the revelation is always of who? Yeah. It's of Yahshua, it's not of the people. Do you understand what I mean? We are witnesses also, but witnesses to him. So we're made up like him, but what is about us is showing him. So here's the point. There was 9 substances that made up the tabernacle. What is that representing? The 9 divine attributes that made up the spirit embodiment. Those 9 divine attributes came out of abstraction, chaos, and darkness, and they were brought into shape and form. These 9 substances were brought out of the darkness of Egypt, brought into the wilderness, an intermediate place, and put into the shape and form of the tabernacle. Do you see that? So those things represent these attributes. Now man is made the same way. And maybe we'll get to that. I hope, pray we can get to it. We won't get into a lot of detail. But see, this same spirit substance became the substance of everything in the creation. So he gave this to his son, and his son built the creation. What's your witness for that in the Bible? Solomon, right? So Solomon had intended to build the temple, right? Or actually David before him intended to build the temple. David was the father of Solomon. But David could not build the temple, right? Because he was a man of war. But David had the pattern, and what he did was he gave that pattern to his son, and he gave the substance to build the temple to his son Solomon. And his son finished the work that his father purposed to do. So do you see this is the son of Yahweh? See? And the Father gives him the substance, puts it in the pattern, he is the pattern, and has him carry out the work that the Father purposed. Okay? So here's the substance that goes into the tabernacle. That substance goes into the temple. Okay? The Father gave the substance to the Son. The Son carries out the work that the Father gives. Yahshua said, I can do nothing of myself. I can only do what my Father has shown me to do. That's what he said. Okay? So now, the stuff, the substance that was built for the tabernacle, they ran short on substance. They didn't have really enough.
No, they had more than...
No, it's exactly the opposite. Right. It said, in fact, that Moses had to restrain them and hold it back. Because when they brought forward the offering, the substance to make the tabernacle, there was enough and more than enough. It was too much. So they could only use part of the substance to make the tabernacle. Do you see that? That's proof, that's witness, that only part of the substance of pure spirit took on the shape and form of Yahweh Elohim. Do you understand what I'm saying? These are things that if you keep them, if you understand them, keep them straight, they'll help in so many ways. Okay. Now, so then he builds the tabernacle, and now it takes on a specific shape and form. Same pattern, okay? So not only was there 9 substances, how many primary vessels are there in the tabernacle? 9 vessels. And those 9 vessels are just put anywhere. No. Of course not. They're in set positions, right? And you can see a larger picture. This is like those attributes taken on shape and form in set positions. Okay? And there's 3 vessels in the most holy place made into a unit. Okay? There's 3 vessels in the holy place. There's 3 vessels in the court round about. Why? Because it's the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Okay? All things manifesting Him. Okay? Now this is in one tabernacle. Now, listen. Was the court round about the entire tabernacle?
No.
No, it was a what? Part of the tabernacle. Make sense? This was a part of the tabernacle. This was a part of the tabernacle. Now, man is made spirit, soul, and body. True? Most holy place represents Yahweh as pure spirit. The most holy place part of man is the spirit of Yahweh that forms both soul and body. Did you hear what I said? I'll say it again. The most holy place part of man is the spirit of Yahweh that forms both the soul and the body. Now, I didn't say the most holy place part of man's body is spirit. Do you see the difference? Okay. This thing right here is a body, right? Is that the whole man? The body. That's only part of the man. I just said, is the court round about the entire tabernacle? No, it's part of the tabernacle. Is the physical body the whole man? No, it's part of the man. But don't you see that this physical body goes around the inner man? Like the court roundabout went around the most holy place and the holy place? Now, from the outside, all you see is the body. From the outside of the tabernacle, if you were just standing over here, all you'd see would be the hangings of the court. Just like from the outside of a physical body, all you'd see would be the outside of the man. But inside the tabernacle was the really important stuff. This is what's inside the tabernacle. And it was already pointed out this morning. The most valuable part about this is right in here. But you can't see it. This is showing Yahweh in His invisibility. Now, you can't see it till you get in there, but let me tell you this. Even when you got in there, you couldn't see it with the sight of your eyes. You know why? Because it was pitch black darkness, right? Again, that's showing that day of Yahweh, okay? But when was it made visible? When Yahweh Elohim appeared in light. That's exactly right, the Shekinah as we call it, okay? And that was a vision. So what I'm saying is, the only way you can see the inner part is with a vision, okay? You're not going to see it with the sight of your physical eyes, okay? That's what it means when it talks about not judging after the outward appearance. You don't judge that a person's soul is evil or righteous because the outward man is pretty or ugly. Follow me? Okay? You might think a woman is gorgeous on the outside. She can be as ugly as sin on the inside. True, right? Or you can take a woman that looks ugly on the outside, because people do this all the time. Be honest about it. You look at the outside, and that carries out most of the times. That's the way people judge somebody. Okay? But a person can be ugly on the outside and the most gorgeous person in the world on the inside. And I'm saying you can look at this outward body. That doesn't tell you by just looking at the flesh what's important about them. You could look at the outward part of the tabernacle, the hangings of the court. That didn't tell you what was valuable on the inside. Make sense? I'm just trying to give you a way to understand the way this really is. Okay? This physical body is like the court roundabout. It's only part of the person. Just like the court roundabout is only part of the tabernacle. but it's the part that you see from the outside. Now, let's go inside, and we'll start working with what's important. The holy place part of the person is not the physical body. The holy place part of the person is the what? That's the soul. And the most holy place part of the person is like the what? Spirit. Now, do you understand what I meant when I said that? I went through all that to explain what I said about the Spirit is the substance, the source, the pure Spirit of Yahweh, the attributes that end up forming both your soul and your body. Now, do you understand what I meant? Okay? It's Yahweh's substance that formed the invisible creation and the visible creation, or the angels and the physical creatures. So it's also Yahweh's substance that forms your soul and your body. Does that make sense? You got it? The angelic creation, or the invisible creation, and the physical creation and the visible creation are two, what Dr. Kinley called counterparts. Those are two counterparts of this great man, this superincorporeal Yahweh Elohim. So you have two counterparts. You have a soul, that's the invisible part. And you have a body, that's the visible part. Do you see that? But it's the Spirit that is the original source and substance that forms both soul and body. Okay? All right, now, if you keep that straight, you can go to the next step. And you can understand all kinds of things about Yahweh and about yourself. Now, I'll just mention this, because this was mentioned earlier, and this is the only reason, this is why I was into it this way. It's like was said this morning. The bone structure of the man is a physical manifestation of the what? Of the soul. You do not see the bone structure of a man from the outside, do you? Okay? You do not see the inner man from the outside. But this is what gives the man his shape and his form, and it's also what gives the man his strength. The bones represent the attribute of strength. And do you see that the bones actually, since they make up what gives you shape and form, the bone structure goes throughout the body? Or, if I could be more specific in terms of the symbolism, the soul goes throughout the entire man. Or the Spirit goes throughout the entire man. I'm not focusing on the flesh. I'm talking about the soul goes throughout the man. It gives the inner man its strength and its shape and form. Okay? Now, we can go into more detail. Bones are threefold, and there's three types. It shouldn't surprise you, right? How many supporting structures were there in the tabernacle? Three. Pillars, bars, boards. How many general categories of bone are there? Three. Long, short, and flat. And they compare. Why three? Because everything is threefold. Do you see what I'm saying? Everything represents Yahweh, Elohim, Yahshua. Okay? All right, now, I want to mention something else, just to help a little bit with perspective. Since the bones go throughout the man physically, symbolizing that the spirit or the soul goes throughout the man, and I'm talking about on a spiritual level, you also have, and let me do this fast, okay? There are 9 physiological systems in the man. Each system compares with the divine attributes and the vessels in the tabernacle. Those systems are divided up, those 9, into 3 parts of 3 each. Just like 3 vessels in each of the 3 parts, 3 attributes on each of the 3 levels. And Dr. Kinley talked about the fact that actually, see, the beauty, love, and justice emanate from the intelligence, wisdom, and knowledge. And the foundation, power, and strength emanate from the beauty, love, and justice. In other words, these attributes are complete within themselves, and they have the power to give birth. They have the power of life. Okay? So anyway, you go on over here, and you look at the way these physiological systems are, and it compares with the vessels, with the attributes, so forth. Now, what we were talking about as far as the bones is the skeletal system. That's in the court roundabout section of these physiological systems. Because the court roundabout section is the three with digestive, muscular, and skeletal. Make sense? Okay? Skeletal, in court roundabout, and it goes throughout the entire man. Skeletal system does. In the holy place part, you have the respiratory, circulatory, and excretory system. The circulatory system is in the holy place part of the attributes, and it goes throughout the entire man. Right? And in the most holy place part of these attributes, you have the nervous system. And the nerves go throughout the entire man. Do you see that? And I'm trying to show you that there are consistent principles or consistent witnesses to the principles of Yahweh. Now, you can work with those things in more detail, but this shows you about the physical man. And if you understand the physical man, that'll help you understand your inner man. You have a physical man and you have a spiritual counterpart. You have a physical body and you have a spiritual soul. And both are made up of the substance of pure spirit. And if we will correlate so that we clearly understand the connections and correlations, which it's like saying we understand exactly the shape and form, the fixed position that those attributes are in. If we will do that, then Yahweh will show us things about himself in a more clear way. And that's why I said, even the things that were mentioned this morning, the first two speakers mentioned so many things it was more than enough to save the world if we really understood and appreciated the significance of those things. But we'll say certain things, and then we kind of let them drop. Well, take those things after you leave the class and remind yourself of them. You don't have to struggle with them, and please don't struggle with them. But remind yourself, because here's what Yahweh will do. And he's made this a promise. If you diligently seek him, he'll bless you. Okay? He's a rewarder to them that diligently seek him. So he'll call it back to your remembrance, and he'll teach you those things, or make you understand those things, if you'll diligently seek him. I hope that's of encouragement and value. And we'll cover more later. If so, praise Yahshua.
Thank you, Dr. Welsh. That brings a close to our class for today. Are there any comments or questions? Enjoyed class. Class announcements are as follows. Classes are held every Wednesday and Friday from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. and Sundays 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. All beginner and instructional meetings are posted on the whiteboard in the back. I believe we're done with November's meetings, so our next meeting will be next Sunday, and that will be the fundamentals class for the month of December, and that will begin at 9 a.m. As a reminder, or to let you know, our next after-class question and answer period will be on Friday, December 22nd. Is that right? Yeah, sounds about right. All right. Reminder that the school is supported by our members. Pledges are due at the beginning of each month. Donations are welcomed and greatly appreciated. For either one, please see our treasurer. From the Director of Public Relations, you can now find our class on Ustream, Facebook, and YouTube, and you can also find us at our website, lansingbible.weebly.com. And all direct donations for the Ustream project are greatly appreciated. You can also find previous classes from Ustream on the YouTube. You just type in IDMR Lansing. We ask that you please keep all food and drink confined to the lobby area to keep to help keep the classroom neat and clean. And we ask that you please do not enter the room during the moderation, prayer, or scripture reading.
On everything he made.
And there are a couple events coming up in 2014,
Even you
which
for
isn't
every
too far
breath
away.
you breathe, you breathe his living
Chicago is
name.
having an event, what is the only name for
So let's
salvation.
sing
This is Friday, April
hallelujah.
4th through Sunday, April
Let's
6th of
sing
2014.
hallelujah.
And Vanderkamp is also having an
Let's
event
sing hallelujah.
in August of 2014.
Let's
That'd be the
sing.
19th through the 24th. There have been
Come
some
on,
materials that have been
everyone, let's
borrowed
sing.
off of this rack over
Let
here.
every
with
living
the city.
thing, let
And if
every
anybody has
living
access to
thing
them,
praise his name.
turn those. They have been gone for some time now.
Come on,
And I
sing
believe
it
that
all
concludes our
out loud,
announcements.
and let them hear it
Let's
for
all
miles
rise for the
around.
doxology so that we
Give
will
it all
dismiss.
your praise
We'll be
to
quoting the last two
Yahweh.
verses of the book of Jude.
So let's sing hallelujah.
Now unto
let's
him that is able to keep you from falling,
hallelujah.
and to
Let's
present you
sing
faultless before the presence of his glory with
Let's
exceeding joy.
sing,
To the only wise
sing,
Elohim our
sing, let's
Savior,
sing.
Yahshua the Messiah our Sovereign, belong glory and majesty, dominion and power, both before all time and now and ever. Let us all say, hallelujah.
You can hear it in the wind as it blows through the trees. You can see it in the wings of a bird flying free. You can see it in a flower as it reaches for the sky. Every ocean praises Yahweh in overwhelming sighs. So let's sing hallelujah.